Welcome back. Um, so this week we're going to talk about The Veldt by Ray Bradbury. First off, I want to apologize for not being able to do this in a live video session as I originally planned. It's been a crazy week. My wife and I just closed on a construction loan for our new house. And so if you've ever been involved in that process, you know how nerve-wracking it can be and how little things pop up. It's thrown my whole week off, so I've been chasing my tail pretty much all week. But I just want to do this video to kind of get you up to speed on Ray Bradbury's The Veldt, and to get you ready for the discussion board posting for this week. And also at the end of the video, we'll talk a little bit about the paper that's coming up. So I guess I want to start this off by asking you for a second just to imagine living in somewhere around 1950. Okay, so the United States was just coming out of World War II, the after effects of that global war. People were still feeling repercussions of it, but life was starting to get back to normal, and in fact life was improving for many people. And at that point, you have a bunch of writers who start asking some questions about the aftermath of some of the technological advances that took place during World War II, and how those technological advances, not only then, but future technological advances, how is that going to change society? What impacts can these technological advances have on the human experience, both individually and also in human relations? So what I want you to do is I want you to pretend for a second you're sitting back in 1950, okay? And I want you to imagine a future where, let's say, for example, you come home, and as soon as you come home from work, your kids come home from school, the house recognizes you're there. The garage door opens for you. You walk inside. As you walk into the main part of the house, next thing you know, the lights start turning on. Maybe the refrigerator pours you a drink. The television comes on, and you walk into the main bedroom area, and those lights come on, and there's some kind of robotic assistant there to help you get into more comfortable clothes so that you can relax. You walk back into the main living area, and next thing you know, you've got this beautiful image painted up on the screen for you. The house is doing it all. Imagine being in 1950 thinking about things like this, right? Seemed like it was a far distant future. Well, on some level, I think we all realize that future is here. I mean, even in my old home in Crestview, and then the new home right here in Blue Water Bay, what we plan to have is automated systems in place to kind of do some of these meaningless little tasks that we have to do every day. We're going to depend on some kind of technology to do that for us. And I'm sure, many of you have similar experiences at home, or even with your smartphone. You can talk to your smartphone now and have it perform tasks for you. Some of these homes, automated systems now that hook up to a little hub in your home, are allowed to basically control all the lights in your house. They can control your coffee maker. They can control your refrigerator. Hell, I think I've seen some that even control the washer and dryer. It's amazing how far this technology has come. But one of the things that Ray Bradbury, who was growing up in the middle part of the 20th century, and by the time The Veldt was published, it was somewhere around 1950. Imagine being Ray Bradbury, thinking about all of the experiences that they witnessed in World War II and the after effects of this huge advancement in technological sophistication that was starting to take place. Ray Bradbury was a wonderful writer, what we call a futurist. Those were the settings for most of his stories, his short stories, were set in the future. He sat around and thought a lot about, not only where we are today, but where are we going? What is the world going to look like in, say, 2000? What's it going to look like in 2050 and 2100? He was heavily influenced by Professor Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, like a lot of writers were during this time, but also H.G. Wells and Jules Verne, who were some of the premier modernist writers around the turn of the 20th century who really kick-started integrating technological themes and advancements into their writing. And Ray Bradbury picked up on that and really took it a step forward, a step further, in thinking about what could happen coming later down the road. So let's get to the Veldt. The Veldt is I love teaching this short story because, man, it's so applicable to the world that we're living in right now, especially when you start looking at the themes that Ray Bradbury brought into the Veldt. He's looking at, one theme is the advancement of technology and how that advancement changes the human experience. Like I said, not only individually, but also socially with one another. We can already see that. I mean, I grew up in a world where smartphones and computers were it was not even heard of back then. Well, computers were, but not smartphones. And now we're living in an age where I can walk down the street, or if I'm out, grocery shopping with my wife, the number of people who are looking down at their phones like this, instead of looking around and interacting with one another. We're still interacting, but we're interacting through a little device, and our whole world has become this, right? Those are some of the things that you can really start to see in the short story, The Veldt. So one of the themes in there that you probably want to discuss and probably look at in your paper is the advancement of technology and how that technology is being used, how it can change the human experience. Also, another theme would be the parent-child relationship. And if you sit back and analyze how George and Lydia interact with Wendy and Peter, you probably recognize some experiences that you either have personally or that you have noticed whenever you have gone out, into the world and interacted with other people. I mean, you kind of see a little elements of this weird, strained relationship between the parent and the child, and where technology is being used to kind of step in and play the role of a parent. And what effect is that having on the children? What effect is that having on as a parent? And then more importantly, what effect is that having on the parent-child relationship? Because we know socially, parents are extremely important in the development of children. Children need parents to have that personal, emotional attachment in order to develop biologically and mentally and even socially. It's extremely important. And if we start relying on technology, smartphones, iPads, in the case of the Veldt, these huge holographic screens were placed in the nursery to entertain and quote unquote educate the children. What effect is that having? Well, we can draw a little bit of personal experience on that, but you can really see where Ray Bradbury was sitting back in 1950 and was able to kind of see where we're at right here in 2020 right now, right? So let's talk about the characters a little bit. You have the two main parents, George and Lydia. who, like most parents, want the best for their children. And so nothing but the best, that they can afford to provide for their children, as far as, giving them the best that the world had to offer. And, all parents want that, right? All parents want their children to have it better off than what they did. But here's a question. Just because you can, should you? Right? And I think that's one of the questions that Ray Bradbury was asking. Just because parents can provide better for their children, and which was definitely the case in the 50s versus, say, the 1920s and the 30s, when the Depression was going on here in the United States. Children were much better off in 1950s and 60s than they were in the 20s and 30s. And Ray Bradbury was seeing where kind of how this progression was going, and he kind of it's a subtle question that he's asking. Just because parents can provide the best of the best for their children, should they? Well, you kind of see where Ray Bradbury was going with this, especially not only in the tale, analyzing the relationship between George and Lydia, with Wendy and Peter, their children. Hold on just a second. We got the garbage guy coming, the recycle people. I'm going to allow this to play out, and I'll be back in just a second. Okay. So we were just talking about George and Lydia and the relationship they had with their children, Wendy and Peter. Also, by the way, I don't know if you picked up on it, but Wendy and Peter, inspirations from another tale that Ray Bradbury knew about, from Lewis Carroll. And we're talking about the Neverland, Peter Pan and Neverland, Wendy and Peter. Those characters are based on those two children from that story. Okay, I said Lewis Carroll, and I knew in my mind it wasn't right. I was thinking of Alice in Wonderland. That's J.M. Barrie, who wrote the play Peter Pan. Those two characters come from, wow, new brakes. Okay. So yeah, those two characters came from Barrie's Peter Pan. I apologize. That was extremely distracting. So anyway, we have that theme that Ray Bradbury is analyzing, and along with how the characters are relating to one another. So one of the things that you can ask is, what is the relationship like between George and Lydia, the parents, and Wendy and Peter, the children? And if I were to use that in a paper, wow, now another one. Good Lord. Blue Water Bay is a very popular day for heavy machinery. If I were going to look at that relationship in a paper, I would look at some outside sources and look at some psychology publications on the effects of the use of technology in the parent-child relationship, to kind of back up whatever you're wanting to talk about if you're analyzing the Veldt with the characters. Okay, so we have these characters, George and Lydia, along with the children, Peter and Wendy. We also have another friend who comes into the picture, who is a psychologist, was a good friend of George's. Can't think of his name. I think Mr. McLean. Yeah, Mr. McLean. He's of course, represents someone who is a little more old school. He realizes the effects that this technology is having, not only on George and Lydia, but also on the family dynamics and relationships with their children. And of course, he is encouraged them, hey, you need a vacation from all this, right? you and your family need to unplug, literally, and go back to the basics and work on your relationships as not only husband and wife, but also as parent and child. Because he recognizes that the technology has kind of stepped in and acted as a surrogate for facilitating those relationships. And of course, as we know, technology is an emotionless, binary, logical entity, and being devoid of emotion, it's not the best facilitator for developing relationships between creatures like us who do rely heavily on emotion in order to define our social circles and define the norms and the relationships that are going to exist within that social circle. Okay, so a little bit about the plot. Of course, I don't want to spoil this for people who are a little bit behind. So, although it's I'm going to have to talk about it a little bit. So spoiler alert, if you haven't read it yet, go ahead and pause this video, read the story, and then come back and pick up at the minute 16, about 16:30. Okay. So here we have George and Lydia. We're kind of like dropped right in the middle of their lives. And we get a little bit of exposition at the beginning, kind of talking about, what their motivations are, and that they've been able to afford a house that has this AI kind of, of course they didn't use the term back then, but we use that today, has this technology built into it that has some type of artificial intelligence, which is able to analyze their current situation and is able to adapt and react to it, and provide all of the basic needs that the family needs throughout the day, so they can focus on other things like work and play. And so we also have Wendy and Peter who are not present at the front of the story. Strangely enough, these are two characters who are 10 years old, but they happen to be off on a trip by themselves. Strange, right? Out enjoying an evening with just them two, and the parents are not there. That is strange, right? But it's strange for a time in 1950. It's really strange for a time right now in 2020. But we are looking at a future tense of reality of what we are experiencing right now. So, as I said a while ago, Ray Bradbury is projecting into the future what society and family situations look like in this future time. So, of course, we have this home that is fully automated. It's able to basically create food on the fly out of the table. It has this huge room called the nursery that's able to project any image that you want just based off of it analyzing what your mood is, or maybe even speaking a word. It's crazy, right? Crazy for 1950, but for 2020, it seems like it's starting to become a little more possible, right? So, of course, near the beginning, George and Lydia recognize that their children are acting very strangely. They're not really connecting with them anymore, and of course, they're sitting around talking about this and trying to figure out what's going on. And once they go into the nursery, they realize, hey, these are some strange images, right? So in the nursery, you see on the screens around you is an image of the Veldt. It's an image of the African plain, where wildlife just runs rampant, and the main animals that you see in the Veldt and its image on the screen is, of course, lions. Peter is fascinated with lions. I am too. I mean, I love lions. I was born in the sign of Leo, so of course I love lions, but for different reasons. Um, and so they start to ask questions about, wow, is this really healthy? You know, uh, me being a parent, I've kind of introduced my 4 year old to some shows on YouTube Kids, and I have noticed tendencies that he has when he gets a little um, anxious to watch another show, and I'm like, well, you've already watched that for like 30 minutes. It's time to do something else, and then that anxiety kicks in. It's like, no, 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 I need more. I need more. So I'm recognizing that one, that there's an addictive nature to it, like George and Lydia, and two, maybe the content that's being viewed on this screen is probably not the best content for children of this age, right? And that's what George and Lydia are fearful of, that the content that's being displayed on the screen in this nursery may not be the best for them. And of course, as we get later into the story, we see that the parents confront the children about the images that they're watching on the screen. The children become very irritated, they become agitated, and when the threat is carried out that they're going to cut off their access to this technology, well, things really start to go bad at that point, right? George and Lydia are following the advice that the psychologist, Mr. McLean, has given them. It's time to unplug. It's time for you guys to get away from this house, get back to the basics. And when George and Lydia carry out that threat, Wendy and Peter have something else in mind, okay? Which takes a turn for the worse. All right, so we understand that something happens to George and Lydia to where whatever image on the screen, it becomes reality. And at some point, after Wendy and Peter lock them in the door, when they're allowed to have 1 more minute access, that 1 more minute, just give me 1 more minute. They lock them in the room, and things go bad after that. All right, so that's the basic plot to the story. Like I said, there's a lot of themes that you can talk about with this story. There's a lot of applicability to the time that we're currently living in. The parent-child relationship is one that I think of. The other one is, the use of technology and the reliance on technology, and more importantly, the addiction to technology. What effects are these things having on our ability to function naturally as humans, not only individually, but also in our relationships, not only with our friends, but also our family and with our coworkers. We can definitely see the effects. Those of us who lived in a world before smartphones, especially, and tablets, and artificial intelligence, and machine learning, and all of these new things and technology coming along. We existed in a world where you were more reliant on your imagination. You were more reliant on other people, not only for entertainment value, but also to function socially. We're seeing that change now, to where some people have, a lot of these guys. I think of the people that are on YouTube right now. A lot of these video gamers, these people make a living doing this. And they're totally relying on the technology, not only for their livelihood, but also for their entertainment. And some of them don't even go out and interact with other people anymore. What effects is that having on not only them, but also as a whole, us as a society? Okay, so those are some things that you can think about when you're analyzing Bradbury. So let me talk a little bit about the paper. I'm going to try to hit this at the 30-minute mark so that I don't go too long. Here's what I'm expecting for the paper. Okay, we've talked about character, we've talked about plot, we've talked about theme, how important those elements are. We've talked a little bit about irony and the use of irony. And now we have 3 readings that we can use to exercise those skills. Ray Bradbury's The Veldt, of course, is the one we just talked about. We also have Toni Morrison's Recitative. as well as Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Birthmark. If you haven't picked up on the theme for my class, all three of these have a close relationship with Plato's theory of the cave or allegory of the cave. Sorry, I've got gnats flying around. And being able to analyze these works not only from your own perspective is important, but also to analyze them from other people's perspectives, i.e., the material that you're going to use from outside sources, doing some library research, some database searches and whatnot. Those are very important to include in whatever you want to state and analyze about these three works in your paper. Okay. God, they're driving me crazy. The most important thing that I want you to remember is that I'm not asking for a thesis when you're analyzing these works. I'm just wanting you to demonstrate a basic understanding on how to analyze character. I want you to demonstrate how you can analyze theme and plot when using those three elements when you're analyzing a piece of text. Okay, so character was extremely important in all three of these works, theme and plot. And so combined with whatever sources you are able to find on the internet, are really looking for two things. One, a basic understanding on how you can analyze each one of those elements using these three stories. And two, if you're able to find and elaborate on a new discovery, something that maybe I didn't know about the work, that you were able to find in one of these outside sources, make sure that you put that in your paper as well. Teaching me something new gets me really excited about your paper. So, and it's a great way of showing me that you not only understand how the basic elements work, but also how to analyze using those basic elements and bringing in other people's perspectives to kind of back up your own. Okay. Okay. So for the format of the paper, it's basically MLA. You understand what the fundamentals are. 12-point font, has to be Arial, has to be Times New Roman. It has to have that header at the top. Okay. Page number in the very right-hand corner of the page, and then your name, my name, the course, and the date. Okay. Those have to be in there along with the title. And then, the body of your work after that. Okay. So if you have any questions between now and the date of the paper, the date that the paper's due, please send me an email or send me a text. I'll respond to your text and I'll help you out any way I can. What I plan to do next week is to throw out some things for you to think about as you're doing some research for your paper, or maybe in the composition phase of the paper, additional things that you can think about, maybe to kind of beef up the paper a little bit if you feel like it's anemic in certain places. I will throw out some little techniques, some ideas that you can use to strengthen that paper and really drive home the objective, which is to understand two things. One, how do I use these basic elements when I'm analyzing these works? And then number two, how do I integrate other people's perspectives to either reinforce my own or to elaborate further on points that I'm wanting to make about my perspective on this work? If you're able to knock out those two things, you're going to have an A paper. Promise you. It's that easy. Okay. All right. So like I said, I promised to hit it at 30 minutes. I see that my time is starting to run out. So like I said, if you have any questions, please send me an email, call me, text me. I'm available. And like I said, next week I will throw out more little tidbits here and there to kind of help you along in the research and in the composition of your essay. Okay. All right. You guys have a great weekend. Again, I'm sorry I didn't go live, but it was a crazy week. All right. So you guys have a great weekend. I will see you next week. All right. Bye bye.